An 85mm lens has been on my list for quite a while, and when SIRUI reached out to me, it was the perfect excuse to finally test one out. It's a classic focal length, great for portraits. But what about filmmaking? So in this video, we're gonna break down what actually makes an 85mm prime look so different. When does it make sense to use, and do you actually really need one? I'm also gonna compare it briefly to the Sony 85mm 1.8 to see how they stack up. Now, you've probably heard people say that longer lenses compress the image, but you might be wondering what does this actually mean. So let's begin there. This is shot on a 35mm lens. And yes, I was gonna talk you through this, but 5mm shot. The camera... I'm gonna stick to voiceover. So it's pretty wide, you can see a lot of my surroundings. And this is shot on an 85mm. Same position, except now I just look way bigger in the frame. But here's the thing, this is really nothing more than just a cropped version of the first image. See? Basically identical. But now let's try something different. This is again shot on the 35mm lens. I'm gonna move back the camera, switch to 85 and frame myself to be the same size. Now I look the same, but the background is completely different. It looks bigger and closer. That's the compression effect. When I step back and switch to 85, the longer focal length magnifies everything in the frame. Not just me, but also the background. But now a smaller portion of the background is in the frame, but it is enlarged, making it look much closer to me. It's not the lens doing some kind of magic, it's just a different perspective. Compression makes the background look closer, but it doesn't change how I look. But in a close-up, it does. A 35mm lens makes a face look slightly stretched, while an 85 keeps it more natural and flat. And that's the first major reason why an 85mm prime looks so different. But there's another one, depth of field. When you focus on something, say a person, not just their eyes are in focus, but also a slice of space in front and behind them. This area is what's known as depth of field. Three things control how long or short this area is: focal length, aperture, and distance. If we compare how long the depth of field is on a 35mm lens at 1.4 and on an 85 at 1.4, the same distance, you see that this area is just much shorter on the 85. And that's what allows you to, even at a distance, to get this nice focus separation. That would simply not be possible with a 35 or even a 50 at the same distance. During my tests, I also shot some landscape style images, and while they look beautiful, it's really just because you have a bit more reach and your frame is tighter than what you see with your eyes. But honestly, for shots where your subject is super far away, like this mountain, you could really just use a 55mm lens and enable crop mode on your camera, and you would end up with almost the same image. But when your subject is closer, an 85 really shines because now you can take advantage of the wide aperture to create depth and separation. The 85mm compresses the scene, making the subject and background feel connected, and the wide aperture helps with focus separation. Another great use for an 85mm lens, two-camera interviews. It just makes everything feel more intimate, the background is softer, there's no distraction, and the focus really stays right on me. And also, you can absolutely subscribe to this channel. Now, before we move on, let's have a closer look at this specific lens. First of all, it is very well made, with a solid metal construction and more premium than what you would expect for the price. And despite the metal, size and weight are reasonable. The autofocus never failed me so far, even during this super demanding scenario. It is silent, fast and accurate, so I don't really have any negatives here. I really like that it has an aperture ring. That said, for my taste, it is just a bit too loose. I found myself moving it quite a few times by accident. Just a little more resistance or even a lock to prevent accidental shifts would have been a great addition. It also comes with a custom button and two switches, one for autofocus and one for declicking the aperture ring. However, let's talk about manual focusing.
The focus throw is just super long, so it's almost too long for simple handheld shooting. If you're manually focusing without any support, you will likely introduce camera shake just from trying to rack focus. For precise, slow manual focusing, it's great, but for quick adjustments, it's not ideal.
And now, if you're like me, you might be wondering, is there a big difference to using a 1.4 to a 1.8 lens like the Sony A7S III?
So a couple of things I noticed. The SIRUI at 1.4 obviously produces larger bokeh compared to the Sony at 1.8. The separation is just more pronounced on the SIRUI. Also, the SIRUI's bokeh is rounder, especially in the corners of the frame. The Sony's bokeh tends to stretch into more oval shapes. For focus performance, I did a focus rack test. Autofocus speed and accuracy in this test was fine. The Sony has faster motors, I think, but the Aurora is definitely quick enough for most cases, at least for me. And one thing I didn't expect when I first ran these tests, my key light seemed to cause a problem for the SIRUI lens. It had a lot more flaring than the Sony, which handled it much better. So flares on the SIRUI is definitely something to keep in mind. I noticed it quite a lot during my tests.
So let's address the big question, should you get an 85mm lens? And honestly, as always, it kind of depends on what you shoot. If you're really into portraits or shoot a lot of two-camera interviews, it is definitely worth it for that alone. An 85mm lens is a fantastic tool for creating that unique background separation and compression. But to be honest, it is not the most versatile focal length. You're not going to use it for everything, but when you do, it's an awesome tool. Now, as for the SIRUI A7S III 1.4, I've been really impressed. It is sharp, it is well built, and the autofocus is solid. The bokeh is really smooth and pleasing, and despite a couple of downsides, I really like this lens. At this price, it is a great deal. And if you're interested, you're going to find a link in the description below. Using it just helps support my channel at no extra cost to you. Okay, that's been it for this one. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one. SIRUI. Hope I got that right.